we've made talking about finances taboo in the church. Everyone's like, I'm not going to push you on your finances and you don't push me on my finances. We all just do our own thing. It's led to a blind spot and a potential unhealthy spot for churches when it comes to finances. Welcome back to Distilled. Kira, welcome.
Thank
Today,
you.
we're going to be talking about our findings from our summer church finance survey. But before we dive in, why did Parable decide to do this survey and survey over 300 churches this summer?
We decided to survey over 300 churches because it's part of a research project to learn about the state of church finances in real time 2025, what resources are needed, the gaps that Parable can fill, or some of our other friends in the finance world can fill, and just to see what churches need to be equipped in.
And we found some pretty cool stuff, right? So we're going to just spend a few minutes to talk through that. So like we said, we surveyed over 300 churches this summer. We found that there's a gap. Pastors overwhelmingly said that their congregations trust them with their finances and that there's a high level of trust and transparency with their finances. But on the other side, when we ask questions about how they're talking about money and how often and how they're shepherding people in finances, saw a big gap. Those were some of the lowest ranking questions. So there's this big gap in pastors saying, yeah, people trust us. And then they're saying, but we're not talking about finances.
It's 300 churches, it's 41 states, and 90% of pastors believe their congregations trust their financial leadership. But then, like you said, we have this gap in the other areas. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
The weakest questions were talking about generosity, to discipling specifically in finances, feeling equipped to lead. It's kind of like, let's pretend you asked me if I'm a cricket fan, which is a sport, I think.
Just
And
the
so
crickets.
you're like, prove it, right? I'm like, well, I don't know. I think there's a ball. I think there's maybe a bat or a paddle or something. There might be more than one player on the field at a time for each team. I don't even know. Are there only 2 teams or 3 teams or what? I don't know how you score. I don't know how you win. I don't know how long the game takes. I could not prove to you that I'm a cricket fan. And I literally
Not
just probably
convincing.
told you everything I do know about cricket. And you could be like, Dan, you are not a cricket fan. But on the other side, if we wanted to talk about football, American football, I could talk knowledgeably about it. I'm not an expert, but I could prove to you that I'm a fan. I think that we have this gap where pastors, again, they think that people trust them, but they're not talking about finances. They're not showing that they are trustworthy with finances. They're not leading in that. I think there might be that hesitancy because we've kind of made talking about finances taboo in the church. And everyone's like, I'm not going to push you on your finances and you don't push me on my finances. And we all just do our own thing. It's led to a blind spot and a potential unhealthy spot for churches when it comes to finances. Hey, we wanted to pause the show real quick and tell you about something exciting that we have going on here at Parable.
Hey, Dan, when you talk to pastors and say the word budget, what do you get?
Oof. You know, Kira, this is a family-friendly show. I don't think I can repeat some. No, I'm joking. But overwhelm, lack of excitement, eye roll, confusion, wanting to run away as quick as they can, and more. Anything to avoid it.
We hear this all the time. At Parable, we believe your budget should reflect your church's calling. That's why we created Parable Budgeting University, a 4-week program to help leaders like you create a mission-driven budget and lead with clarity. Learn more and sign up today at liveyourparable.com/budgetinguniversity.
All right, let's get you back to the show.
Isn't there a statistic that we've talked about before? Isn't it about 1 in 20 attendees actually give to the church, roughly around there?
I don't remember exactly the statistic. What I do know is that of the people that are giving to churches, it's about 2.5% of their income. Which is the lowest that it's been that I know about, because even in the Great Depression, it was about 3.3%. And so fewer and fewer people are giving to the church.
Wow, that's wild. Another stat that I thought was really interesting was 73% of churches said their budgets reflect their mission priorities. That seems like a high number, but it's not everybody. It's not the 90%, right? When we're talking about budgeting, we're talking about telling the story of your church finances. Those have to reflect the priorities of the church because we're in such a mission-driven culture of, I'm going to put my dollars where I think they're going to be used most.
Yeah. What we also found in the survey is yes, the question about are we spending them on mission? Are we being led by the Spirit and praying and seeking guidance when we're planning out our finances and our budget? Those rated high. But the questions again about, hey, we're equipped to lead. Hey, we understand our finances, those rated low. There's a potential here that we have the same kind of gap where we think what we are doing is being strategic with our finances and putting our dollars on mission. But on the other hand, we aren't equipped for it. I'll tell a story from when I was on staff at church and we were doing a building campaign. Someone from the congregation I hadn't met came up to me after a service and said, "Hey, are you Dan? I'd love to sit down and ask you some questions about your finances." We went to lunch and the whole conversation at lunch was about our finances. What he's getting at is, how do you all manage your finances? How are you protecting your finances? It wasn't awkward. It was all appropriate questions, but it was very detailed into our finances and how we're stewarding our finances well. Well, a couple of months later, we do our commitment Sunday and we have our largest commitment. It's the next day that check shows up and it is from that family. What I realized is they were new to the church. They felt called to make a gigantic donation towards our new facility, possibly one of the largest investments, largest checks this family would ever write. And he wanted to make sure that that money was going to go on mission and it wasn't going to get either lost to theft or fraud, something like that. But even to the idea of, like, we've talked about this, but just not being spent on good things instead of the best things. And in this case, obviously we had a specific need, which was the building that we were putting it to. But he wanted to make sure to invest in this ministry. I want to get the return from this investment, not in dollars, but a return in kingdom and impact. That's one of the things that as a pastor, as a leader of the church, that's part of how we steward is to make sure those dollars are going towards the greatest things and that we're getting the maximum return on investment for all these people who are donating to the church. I think that's part of the reason why we see lower giving in the last few years is because people don't see how their dollars are going on mission. They aren't being told about how to steward their own finances and what it means to be generous. They're just spending it on other things. And we say, oh, millennials aren't giving. Well, we're not talking about it. We're not shepherding them. So until we do that, we can't expect our people to be giving in a biblical way because they're not being taught that in the church.
Yeah, that's so good. It makes me think of when I first became a believer. I was attending a church and you read about tithing, it's in there when you're reading the Bible and you're learning about Jesus. But I didn't really understand the importance of it or even the importance of my own personal finances being in order until I took Financial Peace University through my church, right? And since then, that was 15 years ago. I was fresh out of college. I was in grad school trying to figure out my way in life. Since then, I've had a budget. And
Hmm.
since then, tithing to my church has been a regular part of my life. But it was because of that educational piece. It was because the church saw fit to invest in me as a person, not just to say like, hey, you should tithe to us because we're really needing your money. They didn't mention that, it was more of a, hey, if you want to understand more about finances the way that the Bible talks about it, take this class. And that naturally fed into the church because now I understood the purpose of tithing.
Yeah. Well, and that's so good what you said in there because there is this, I think the wrong way to go about it is to talk about the needs or to kind of put people in a position where they feel like, oh, they're begging for my money or that I'm guilted in or pressured into giving to the church.
Dan, can I just say, where's the one place I've never put my money? It's at the Sarah McLachlan dog commercials because they're so sad that I turn them off to what you're saying. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
It made me think of that.
No, right. That's kind of tugging at the emotional heartstrings. It's hard to watch those commercials, right? I think so often in the church, it's like we don't talk about money until we need money. That's part of why it feels like a taboo subject. It feels awkward, right? Instead of being like, Jesus spoke about money all the time. And Jesus makes a direct connection between the heart and money. He recognizes that's a way of measuring where your trust is. It's a way of measuring where the resources that have been given to you. Money kind of is a representation of your time, your talent, your treasure, all kind of wrapped up into one thing, right? How are you stewarding that? Where are you putting those resources? If you just talk about finances as, hey, we need to keep the lights on, or this problem came up and we do it, people are like, okay, they're just begging for money. Instead, if you start talking about money and say, here's all the mission things that we're doing that we're excited about, and get them excited about the vision and mission. And then, like you said, you're giving opportunities where people can be trained and equipped, doing classes through Generosity University or Financial Peace University, things like that, where they can learn a biblical perspective on money. Forget the impact that that's going to have on your budget. I think that's an important part of discipling people in your church. And that's what Jesus said, right? Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so we need to be doing that as churches. Forget budget implications. That's proper discipleship. And of course, it will have budget implications, but that's not the reason to do it. The heart is, where's their heart? How are they stewarding their finances in a biblical way?
Yeah, that's so good. And we've kind of talked about ways that you can disciple and the purpose and the heart behind it. But are there practical steps or practical resources that we can share with those listening to kind of take that first step? If you're looking at it and you're like, yes, I want to do that. How the heck do I do it?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is we've talked about the four numbers that every pastor needs to know. And I would
Yes.
say know those. We have an episode in Distilled where we talk about those. Go listen to that episode, download the template and know those numbers. In summary, it's just what'd you get, what'd you keep, what do you have, and how many people gave. If you know those numbers for each month and you look back over the last year and understand the trend and how you're doing against kind of your projected and budgeted numbers, then you're going to have a really good understanding of your finances from a high level. And if someone asks you questions about the church finances, you're going to be able to speak more like you're talking about football than you're talking about cricket. You've got to get to where you can speak very knowledgeably about your finances. If someone wants to dig in, you can hand them off to your finance person. But I'd say that because I think when you have confidence in the church's finances, that's what gives the donors confidence to donate into your church and invest in the ministry at your church. So I'd say that. And then the other one is we have an episode coming up soon where we sat down with Overflow Mark from Generosity University and
Yes.
just talked through the new tools that they're creating around this in order to equip your congregation. Listen to those. Action step in that was to talk to Mark. And so do at least that. You'll have a great conversation with him and pick up some stuff from that, if nothing else. But see if that might be a right solution for you and being able to just have a resource that you can equip. So you
Right.
might not feel equipped to lead others in talking about generosity, but you can know the basics and you can find the right tools to help make that happen at your church.
Okay, that made me think of the financial equipping aspect of this survey. One of the stats that kind of threw me was over 40% of churches admitted they don't feel equipped in forecasting, budgeting, cash flow. And some even confess that they avoid preaching on money because they don't feel confident in their own stewardship. And it actually made me think of our conversation with Bob Loddick, which we can put that in the show notes as well, just talking about personal stewardship and why that matters so much for pastors learning to do that well and how that can naturally flow into the church and how they view finances. Are there any more pieces about that financial equipping that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, what you said is great. I think there's a balance here of just being confident in the church's finances. And that's where, again, the core four report we talked about, know those four numbers, listen to Distilled, bite-sized episodes to just help you better understand your finances so that you can lead better and feel more confident. And that will show when you're talking to your donors, like my story of talking to the donor in our building campaign. Create opportunities for people to learn. And when I say it that way, I mean, that could be doing something with Bob Loddick or Generosity University, but it could also be finding people in your church that are gifted in generosity that understand finances and have them create these opportunities, help them train or to lead people through these Generosity University courses. There's a lot of ways to get it done that don't just have to be you, but you have to lead it. You have to make sure that it's happening. And so I think with those things, you can both be confident and you can start to train and equip your people. You'll feel much more engaged in the financial process with that, where it's just going to be comfortable to you to talk about it now. It's not going to feel foreign when people start talking about finances or you give a financial update or you lead them through something during the time to give, whatever that looks like. So I think just start making it a regular thing at your church as you talk about it, as you're teaching on it and giving opportunities for people to learn as you're growing in confidence with it.
Yeah, that is so good. Okay, another part of this survey, there's so much we could say on this survey. We found so many cool things, but the digital giving, the technology, the systems part, I'd love to go there next because once you're feeling equipped, once you're feeling confident, this is an essential piece to the puzzle. I know that we had about 2/3 of churches say that they collect their tithes and offerings through digital giving. But there were also some really interesting stats that I was curious if you could speak into about what kinds of systems and what kinds of bookkeepers people used and how that made them feel confident in their numbers.
Yeah. So there's kind of two pieces there. So technology and systems. What we found is that churches are moving into using technology more and more, but there was still some gaps in it. So over 1/3 of churches still said that a majority of their giving is not coming in through digital. So it's still cash and check. It's how people choose to give, right? But it was a little surprising to me. I do think that technology allows for or creates the opportunity for better accountability with that. Because sadly, when we get churches that come to us who have not been partnered and working with us, they had someone in their own church that was stealing from them. It's the checks and the cash that they're figuring out a way to do something with. It's not the digital. So it's not to say you shouldn't do that. You should make it really easy for digital giving to happen, and then build processes around it to make sure there's multiple sets of eyes. So even if someone wanted to do something, they know they can't because someone's going to find it. There's other people looking. So I think that's one of the values of technology is the transparency there. The other thing we saw, we work with over 450 churches, surveyed 300 churches. Most of those were not actually churches we work with. We didn't want to just see like what are our doing. So we worked with a lot of organizations who also sent this out to their churches so that we could see between different denominations, networks, different ways of handling their finances, what everyone's saying. And so overall, we had people that were someone who's in-house that's on staff. We had people that were volunteers who were handling the finances. And then we had someone who's paying a third party bookkeeper, something like Parable, or it could even just be a local general, not even church specific. So that was kind of the breakout. And about 1/3 were using a third service. The other 2/3 were either staff or volunteer, so someone in house. But what's interesting is 2/3 of the churches were using some sort of third party to be involved in their finances. So whether that was a third party accountant, could be a ECFA who's doing accreditation, or it could be like having an audit done every year. Somehow there's this oversight from someone that's not inside the church. So we see that trend, and I think that will continue to grow because it gives confidence and accountability, right? To donors, when you see that, oh, you're ECFA accredited, or you have a church specific bookkeeping company that's going to raise a flag if they see some issue, that gives a lot of confidence to your donors. So I think we're seeing a trend towards technology opening up visibility and transparency and using a third party company that is going to give confidence to your donors and is just going to help you run more efficiently with your finances.
So good. Okay, Dan, there's so much we could say, but what is one action step or key takeaway every pastor or church leader can take from this episode to move closer to putting every dollar on mission?
Yeah, I would say if you didn't take the survey, you can still take the survey. And one of the things we're doing with it is we are providing benchmark data. So you'll take the survey, and then as we're collecting data, we're actually going to send you a summary that says, how did you do in the 7 key areas? And how did you compare to the other churches that took the survey? We've found that churches are longing for benchmark data. How do we compare? And not in a like, are we better or worse? Or what we're doing right? What are other churches doing for these areas? This will give you tangible data to say, where did you rank relative to the other hundreds of churches that have taken this survey? So I think you'll find a lot of value in that. And the other thing I'd say, and this is not just trying to be a shameless plug for Distilled, but is to subscribe to Distilled. Every time we have a new episode, engage with it, take the action item. And then that way, you'll just grow in confidence in leading in your finances, and you'll feel more confident to have these conversations with your people. So I would say though there's 2 action steps today: survey and then subscribe to Distilled.
Yes. And all of the resources we mentioned today, you can find at churchfinancemadesimple.com.
Great. We'll see you there.